Okay. I fixed a bug, which was inside the gradient set. I was reading this line, but I wasn't writing it, so it created a bug which actually caused it to crash, which was really bad. This little current file saves the current setup, and I did kind of think I had it such that it wouldn't crash, but it did anyway. It wouldn't crash even if that file was not was corrupted, so to speak, or was not giving something correct, but actually I'm not doing the right check to make sure that happens still. Inside the load project aspect I'm not. Anyway, it's annoying, it's something I'll have to remember to fix. But in the meantime, in fact, maybe I should just, because it's not, for this project it's not a thing I've done, but I will say load project error checking needs completed, must create new project when file fails. Okay. Now, the gradient editor box. I got rid of that other picture, but it was basically a two-dimensional array of color values, creating individual gradients vertically and being sort of readable horizontally by the system that's going to render it. But what I was thinking was, I think that the contents of the gadget, I think I know all of the things that need to be inside that gradient editor window. And there needs to be the apply and the cancel. And there needs to be the main editing area. And there needs to be a button, well, I'll make a list. So there's the main editing area, then there's a button for the low threshold. And there's a button for the high threshold. It doesn't matter that I can't read these, I just need to remember that these are buttons. And they are sort of like, they're going to be buttons similar to the sort of ones that I use for a lot of the buttons in the editor, which are like text fields. I do have a text field gadget, obviously, but I kind of like having buttons to click on to change values. But that's what they'll be like. Anyway, normal sort of buttons. The problem with my buttons is buttons like this. My GUI has no facility for drawing buttons vertically. It's not impossible to code in. And if it wasn't for me faffing around with the monkey code to, I shoot myself in my own foot, thinking I'm doing myself a favour, and out of curiosity, but anyway, to make these letters rotate would not be that easy, and ideally, to make this window nice, I would want letters written up and down the sides of this box that is going to be here somewhere. But as it is, they're going to be horizontal, and I think I might just make them buttons at the bottom of the box down there somewhere. As I think these are the only buttons that need to exist outside of the main edit. Not quite outside the main edit window. Actually, there will be buttons which are sort of incorporated into it, I think. And actually the main edit window should occupy almost all of the face of the window. These two buttons might be, well, it's hard to put them in a place where it's totally sensible at the bottom, because one sort of refers to this point in the gradient and one refers to this point in the gradient, but I might just have to put them down here somewhere for the sake of balance. And I somehow have to indicate that this is time, and from the bottom to the top is height, or overlaps, but I'm going to call it just height. I'm writing this here, but I can't write something up and down there. I might just have to do something like write the word high and have an indicator line along here, and write the word low and have an indicator line along there, and then have the word time, like a label, and somehow two arrows. You know, I can draw arrows just as images and then draw them. Or I could make a type of skin that is a shape like that. That's a couple of questions which I'm not sure the answer to, but the actual content of this will be unusual. I'm drawing this scrappily, it's horrible, but now this is going to be a set of buttons. I had previously thought that I'd put the buttons all across the face of it, but I won't. I'll only put the colour buttons on the face of it. These buttons at the side will be for adding columns or rows. I had also initially thought that I might make it such that you could have different numbers of entries in the colour gradients in each column, each time column. But I'm not going to bother doing that, basically. It makes it a little bit more complicated to figure out the intermediate values, and it means that actually figuring out intermediate values that for certain hit the colours that you have determined at certain heights and times is not something I can easily figure out how to do when I imagine, you know, the waves of the, you know, the graphs formed by the colours. So I'm just going to be more simplistic and limit you to adding rows, an entire row, which is to say you will have an actual grid of colours. And obviously adding an entire column, and also they will be spaced evenly in time and height. That's a thing to do with my spline code and making it quick to read. I might implement a non-regular sort of spline code where you could do something more different, but for the time being I'm not. So another issue is the spacing of the gadgets that are inside here. Let's say that the first time you opened it, the display was something like this. And it would be strange because it would just be a graduation, and if the default colour there was black and the default colour there was at the top was white, then it would just be a single sort of graduated square with dark black at the very bottom, dark grey, you know, fading to light grey up to white. And as you stretched the window around, these things would... Well, that's the next question. And so with this setup, what actually would be in these bars at the top would be something like this: plus, plus, plus. And there could be a minus, a minus, and a minus there, except for the fact that this is the final sort of, the most simple gradient. If I was to add if I was to click one of these buttons, let's say I clicked that button, then the display would change and would look like, it would have a massively crooked side. That's going to be hard to program. But the display would change and it would look like this. Oops, I did that the wrong side. That was silly. It was handy. And then there would be minus buttons there, and there would still be plus, 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 plus. There wouldn't be minus buttons in these ones yet. But then if the setup was looking like, so then if you just clicked the plus, these new values, what you've effectively done is add a column here, and these new values would just take on the same ones as the previous ones, because they're being added. Well, I shouldn't say that actually. Yeah, they probably will, because they're being added on the end, technically being added to the end of the list. So you still have just a black to white gradient up the back, but these are all color buttons and can be individually clicked. But then if the setup was like this and you clicked this button, it would then look like this. I'm talking this through because I'm thinking about it to myself. I'm not taking a lot of care here. And there'd be a new set of buttons there. And again, there would be the bars at the side. And they would say minus, minus, plus, plus, plus. Minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. Now these would be filled in with minus because it is now possible to remove one of these rows and still effectively have a gradient. Also, when this color row is added, I think it will just take on the appropriate point between these two colors. So it'll read effectively read the value of the gradient at this point between these colors and these colors, because it could be different, and automatically fill in these colors to maintain the overall sort of look of the gradient, and then you can individually change these. So through these sort of side buttons, you add and remove columns, and by clicking the individual color buttons, you alter the color values. Well, I'm so glad I looked down there and saw that my mic was still on. It's so sensitive. Now, that's the way I'm going to build it, I think. When I think about it, that's all there is to it. For the time being, I might even leave out altogether all the labels, because the functionality of it's quite complicated, and thinking about how exactly I'm going to place things, or how I might have to define new sort of skins being just, you know, a sort of rectangular object you can draw with my GUI system easily, which look like a timeline, which I can print something at the top and bottom or in the middle of, and ultimately, improve the GUI. It would be better if I could print things vertically or at any angle. It would be better if the whole thing could work at any angle. That would be really sweet. Or anything could be rendered at any angle, and it could be done. Anyway, so for the time being, this is my thinking. Now, there's a lot of careful spacing, and also my GUI uses what I would guess is now considered really old style, just because I like it. And if I do have to move away from Monkey, which I probably will have to, into C++, I might end up writing my own GUI anyway and using this style, because it's really nice to have the code and just faff around with it. But the style of it is such that the easiest thing to do is make the buttons and the space between the buttons all proportional, which means the size of the buttons will grow and shrink, and it'll be odd to look at. It's not. I don't find it ideal. What I would prefer is that the color buttons that appear in the grid have a basic size and they space themselves differently. And actually, according to this old school method I have of aligning the sides of gadgets with to be, to describe their relationship with the sides of their parent gadget, actually makes that specific thing a little bit tricky without doing a lot of, I think, sort of overlapping zones. Zones because they're effectively invisible gadgets. And I should have a think about it, because maybe it's not that complicated. Excuse me, I should have unmiked myself there. Maybe I'll have a little think about that just now, because if I did want to keep the color button gadget a constant size, but have it moving proportionally across this variable size field, the sides can individually be told that they are locked to either the low side in their dimension, the high side, or to remain proportional between them to wherever you've placed it. Similarly with the top and bottom, they can be locked to the low side or to the high side, or to be proportional. Top, bottom, left and right. So I can't just set, if I want to have the box move proportionally across the face of the field, but stay the same width, I can't just set both sides to stay proportional, because as this increases, this will increase, if that's either side of the gadget, and this is its parent. And I can't just set one side to be proportional, because any way I set up the sides, they will, if I set them up to be in a proportional position, the face, the size of the actual button will change. I think that the way that I have to do it is very cleverly set up a series of zones across the face of the field. And if the setup was, say, this one, which is 2 columns and 3 rows, the zones, I think, it's really hard. And I have a feeling that I would sort of draw all this out and then realize that it's quite wrong. And then I think one there and one there. And so these are a set of zones. These boundaries are proportional, so they move up and down. This boundary has to be locked to the top. This one is proportional. These two boundaries. No, it's really hard to figure out. I'm thinking about where a zone is such that I'd position a color button at one corner of it as its child, so that the color button could have all of its sides sort of locked high. So wherever this corner of this zone moves, this color button just sticks to it. Similarly with this one, but this boundary at this zone is locked to the top, so it stays there. These two I do want to move proportionally. That I don't. Yeah. That and these two. So the common thing is that each button is locked to the bottom left of a zone. And they just have to have, I think this works, this sort of spacing carefully figured out. This space and this space. Because this bit I want to grow, this bit I want to grow, and this bit I want to grow, this bit I want to grow, and this bit I want to grow. So it's like, and then I might have to place these buttons at the top inside the zones. So the zones have to be of a size that these buttons are also inside them. The plus and minus, minus, plus, minus. A lot of bits and pieces to making it do that. I feel like it would look more attractive. But the easy thing to do is just to make all of these things proportional. It also means that the buttons get smaller and smaller the more rows and columns you add. No matter how large you stretch the editor window to be. I'm going to put aside my pen for a while. So when I imagine it occupying almost all of this space, with a couple of other buttons down here, I'd really like it to occupy, I mean, some sort of indicator along the side that it's that higher is, yeah, well, higher is higher, you know. I'm so bad at actually describing things. Towards the top of the gradient indicates is where the line has crossed itself more often. The pixel will be the color will be assigned a color closer to the top of the gradient with these thresholds, which will be down here in buttons, I think. Really they should be, I guess, out the way of those apply and cancel buttons, but I can just make loads of space for the actual field. I'm going to have to stop thinking about this and actually make it work. So, in a gradient editor, there's an apply button and a cancel button. And there is a low threshold button. I'll get annoyed with that. Long name, high threshold button. There's an editing field or editing zone. Well, I'll call it the edit zone. Or will I make a panel of it? I could make it an indented panel. I'm not so sure about indented panels. I'll say it's a panel, and actually that's, I think, that those are the only individual buttons that I generate. There are obviously going to be more buttons, and I think that they will be in lists. I need a set of horizontal controls, vertical controls, and color buttons. Now this is, well, how do I want to do it? What's going to happen really is there'll just be an update edit panel method or something like that on this, which will look at the gradient set instance as it's loaded up into it, and will generate the panel. And that will include the horizontal, vertical and color buttons. Sorry, I had to check. But how am I actually going to access those buttons will determine how I want to store them here just now, whether or not I want them in linked lists or arrays or what. I'm going to have a think about that, and actually I'm going to take a break just now. I haven't done very much, but I have thought some things through. I'll be back shortly.